Hey guys, Omni here. So last night I went and saw Avatar Book 2, The Way of Water. Wait a second. Hold on. Sorry. Anyway, I'm going to get this right out of the way up front. I had a joke totally prepared for this that was not that one. I'm glad I kind of came up with a little something there. Like, it was nothing, but like, I was going to be like, I wanted to start off this video going, I went to this movie and there was no bending, 0 out of 10. Well, that would be inaccurate if I did follow up with that because no spoilers, but there's kind of bending in this, at least in some way. But that said, I went into this movie completely disinterested. I'll be completely upfront. I've talked about this on my live streams and stuff like that, and a few times in other videos that if you had asked me how excited I was for Avatar 2, or any of its sequels, or anything of the sort, I would have been like, my interest level is at 0 to like -100. I don't care. Like, I never disliked the original. I just never understood why it was as big as it was. I saw it, I enjoyed it. It was a technical marvel, it was eye candy, but like as far as story goes and the characters go, it just wasn't anything that like made a lasting imprint with me. But it became the biggest movie in the world. So it was one of those things that just kind of always stumped me a little bit. So like when they announced that we're going to do 800 sequels to this thing, I was just like, what are they smoking over here? That said, I still went into this with an open mind, as I tend to do. And I will say, I infinitely enjoyed this so much more than the first movie. And I think it might be that change of framing where the first one was very much a story we have heard and seen many times over, and the characters themselves just weren't that engaging. And I will say, this isn't a wholly original story itself, not this film, but it does pull from very other different pockets that it's enough variation that it's not as egregious here. One of the changes that I really did appreciate in this that really helped engage me further into the story is the change of role for Jake and Neytiri. They are parents now, and we are following through a majority of the story of their kids. And there's quite a lot of kids. There's quite a huge litter that they have here. They have 4 to themselves, though one is adopted with a little bit of a story that I don't want to go into because it is a bit of a spoiler. I also don't want to say who's playing them because I think that is also kind of a spoiler. And I'll be honest, their adopted daughter, I'll say that much, is the most interesting aspect of this story, and honestly something I want to see what they do with going forward. There's a very interesting thing going on with this character. They have 3 kids unto themselves, and then after the events of the previous film, you know, humanity was pretty much sent packing back to Earth, aside from a couple of remnants here, and there's because of the trip through space and cryostasis and the science within, they can't take babies with them. So there was a child that was born on Pandora and was too young to actually be taken back with the rest of the stock, and was left behind with the scientists that lingered behind. Some of those were the main characters that we saw in the first film as well. The scientists that helped Jake and all that survived at least a lot of the massacres that was going on. But this kid ends up being raised a human with the Na'vi, and he's kind of like this Donnie from Wild Thornberries, though with language skills. He speaks Na'vi, he speaks English, and he's kind of this blend of both worlds, and he's a really interesting character, and he forms this great bond with the Sully family that is really interesting and works in a really fun way throughout the story. During this period, though, the movie starts with like the first 10-15 minutes of the film, maybe a little bit more, I could be off, is kind of like an Avatar 1.5, as it kind of gives us a montage of getting us up to speed of where the family is today, seeing them kind of grow within the tribe, grow with Jake becoming the chieftain, and then having their children, and then seeing how things have changed on Pandora, and things are seemingly great. Though after a couple of years, nearly a decade, humanity finally returns. Turns out the Earth, in all of their attempts, is just no longer going to be habitable, and now Pandora is the next best place for humanity to look at for a potential Earth 2. So humanity's coming back through hell or high water to make this work. and they come in full force. There's no diplomacy whatsoever, and it results in this guerrilla war that outbreaks, and we skip ahead a year. So that's when the story really picks up, is in the middle of this year, after this year has passed, and we pick up with Jake, who's basically turned from tribal leader into basically military head of the Na'vi, as they are making these guerrilla strikes on the encroaching human expansion on Pandora. And that kind of kicks the ball rolling. And it's this aspect that also makes this kind of interesting, because of this war that is kind of developed and outbroke on Pandora. It changes the perspective of this family as well, accentuating Jake's past, where he came from the military himself. Because of what's happening today, he's kind of, I wouldn't say forced, but he starts to treat his own family like its own squad. Like, he's starting to treat his kids as if they are soldiers before they're his children. And it starts to create these kind of issues that start to develop these insecurities, these hopes, these fallacies that start to form within the family unit itself, that he kind of has to learn to undo throughout the movie. It's kind of interesting the way they kind of framed that whole thing and the effects that it had on his family. I will say that there is a squad of new avatars that have an interesting little connection into the story. Again, I don't want to go into it. I can't remember what all is actually public, so I don't want to go into it too much. But there is some Na'vi avatars that have been created by the humans to kind of try to, like the first movie, infiltrate into this region and basically just take out Jake, because they know about Jake from the first film and all that and everything that happened, that he's the one of them that turned rogue, betrayed their own people, and became one of the indigenous here. So he's like the guy they are just after. So the whole thing is about them trying to take down Jake. And this battle just keeps escalating to the point where, as we see in the trailers, we have a bit of a change of scenery. Things get so bad to the point that they don't want to endanger their tribe any further than they actually are. And since they are actually headhunting Jake himself, he chooses to exile himself away from their home tribe. And that's where they go off into the ocean lands. And we meet some other tribes, the tribes that kind of grew up on the oceans. And that's where we start to have them try to adapt from being this forest family to a family that has to learn the way of the water, which kind of bodes the title of the film. Through this, we have a lot of very similar story elements that play out from the first film, which I do believe is intentional, because this movie deals a lot with cycles and the cycles of nature, of death, of life and rebirth, these cyclical things that happen just naturally in the world. So while there is a lot of very familiar things happening from the first movie yet again, but with a different set of paint, we have the Sully family integrating into this new way of life with these new tribes, these new ways of operating and living and communing with nature and pulling their weight, that we kind of have this story going on again. What makes this interesting is the point of view of the kids and how they have been uprooted from their home and how they're trying to fit in the pressures of, being the son of the chieftain, being the second son of the chieftain, and being the daughter of the chieftain, and how these things all kind of work. And then being, of course, with Kiri, she's the one that has been adopted into this family, and she's always been a bit of an outcast. And to mention, because Jake is not a real avatar, or not real avatar, a real Na'vi, his children are also kind of half-breeds and shunned out by this tribe, who is, not only are they kind of like, oh, you forest dwellers, they're also like, you forest dwellers, and you're also not really Na'vi. That's at least what they say, because they're half Na'vi, half human, half this weird hybrid because of the avatars that were created with Jake. Anyway, it's this whole thing. It's really interesting, and the change of scenery is gorgeous. The ocean life, the way they live, the way they operate and breathe, what James Cameron has brought to life in this, and is just breathtaking. It is spectacle. This is a technical marvel. No matter how many shortcomings this story has, which honestly, it's not much. I really found the story engaging, even if it pulls from a lot of different familiar beats and elements that we've seen in other movies. Again, like I said in the beginning, it's enough variation that it doesn't get as tired as the original one does. And I think a lot of this comes from taking notes from the people's, like vast majority of people's complaints with the first film. Also, if you're familiar with James Cameron's works at all, there are homages to so many of his films just sprinkled throughout this thing. I caught some T2 stuff, some Aliens, some Titanic. Like, there's a bunch of different things that I pulled from this. I was watching, I was like, this looks familiar. The action is top notch. This is a beautiful movie. The action is stellar. The action is pulse pounding. And there's a lot of heart in this film. And there's some bits that take me out of it. Again, it's mostly the human elements because, again, the humans are just kind of like that cartoonish human that you see in a lot of these like animated features and stuff like that, like Ferngully and going on, you know, we're just evil and here to tear it up. There's even a character just purely reminiscent of that in here that is just borderline a cartoon character. And that's kind of where I lose it. Also, despite humanity returning just for out of survival, there does turn a point where we do another story thread that gets repeated from the original one. Like in the first film, we had the business guy who was just hungry for unobtainium, and unobtainium was this thing that is going to save the world. It makes so much money. We're going to sell it. We're going to sell it. We're going to be rich. There is a character and a group of people working specifically to collect a new resource that is the new extremely valuable thing that is only found here on Pandora and stuff, and it just gets a little ridiculous. But it literally made me chuckle in my seat. What's interesting though is what I found that they were doing with how they paid homage and tributed Stephen Lang's character from the first film and found a way to bring that storyline forward and then integrate it into what's happening today and how that connection and that bridge is being built between the Na'vi. It's hard to talk about this without spoiling anything, and I'm really trying to do that, but they found an interesting way to kind of keep that legacy in the film itself. And the way they did it is really interesting, and it's something that I want to see how they carry it on forward. The miracle of this movie alone is getting me interested in what is coming, what they plan on doing with this. I didn't expect to like it at all. I didn't want to like it at all. Part of me, just out of spite, didn't want to like it at all. And I found myself really engaged with it. Again, is it perfect? No. It's a technical marvel, and I think that is something you can't dispute. The film's beautiful. It pushes the boundaries of CGI into new heights, man. It's ridiculous. I still think there is still that disconnect. It still never feels fully real, not to me at least. Especially that becomes apparent anytime they're with, human characters. It is still there's still that gap. There's still going to be that gap, and I'm wondering how long it'll take before we kind of really close that out. I don't think it's that far away with deepfake technology and stuff like that, the way things are advancing. I think give this another year, maybe Avatar 3, Avatar 4, maybe that'll blend even more seamlessly. I did watch this in 3D, and like the first, it sets the bar. It makes any other 3D movie look like trash. And I'm a person that doesn't like 3D movies, but I was like, I want to see this how it was intended to be viewed, and it was... It didn't ruin the film. It didn't hold it back. And it doesn't, I don't think the 3D helps the movie personally, but it was still fun. I still had a blast with this thing, man. There's a lot of things that are set up here that I feel like I really want to see how they pay it off. It does at times feel like two movies, that this probably could have been trimmed down a lot. I don't think it needed to be 3.5 hours long. If they wanted to keep a lot of this stuff in, it could have easily been like 2 films or branched out and make 6 avatars. I don't know. Guys, have you seen it? What did you think? Sound off the comments. Let me know your thoughts down below. We'll carry on the conversation after the video. Feel free to join us in our Discord. We could talk about it there as well. Links to that in all my social description box below. Follow me in each and every one of those. Before we go, I want to shout out our channel legends. Manny Share, Ryan, Karen, Philly Vane, Yori, Corey Scott, Margaret Grace, Melita, Robert Anguiano, Raven McGann, Jeffrey Hale, M. Sephiroth, and Jake Cantrell. Thank you guys so much for continuing support. But that's it for this video, guys. And I'll see you all in the next one. Take care, everybody.